It was 11:47 p.m. at a lonely mountain gas station. The door chime pinged. A shadow slipped inside. Not a thief, a bobcat. Security footage doesn't lie, but the sight defied belief. The night shift clerk, Paul Hendricks, had seen bears and raccoons, but nothing prepared him for this. When Paul tried to shoo it out, the bobcat lunged at him, then padded straight to the pet aisle, deliberately snagged a bag of cat treats, and strolled right back out. Few nights later, Paul's coworker Dave was on duty. The chime rang. It was back. This time, it didn't leave. Instead, it ripped into the treat bags, lying on the floor and feasting like it owned the place. But when wildlife officers arrived, something incredible happened. The real reason behind the mysterious thief would soon leave them all speechless. Before we start, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. The mountains of western North Carolina had witnessed countless interactions between wildlife and civilization over the decades, but nothing quite like what was about to unfold at the Pinetop Gas and Go on Route 74. The convenience store sat at the edge of the Pisgah National Forest, where civilization met wilderness in an uneasy truce. During the day, tourists stopped for coffee and trail maps. At night, it became something else entirely. A beacon of fluorescent light in an ocean of darkness, visible for miles through the dense pines. Paul Hendricks had worked the graveyard shift at the gas station for 3 years. At 42, with a weathered face and perpetually tired eyes, he'd seen his share of late-night oddities. Confused bears rifling through dumpsters, raccoons staging elaborate raids on the trash, even a black snake that had somehow found its way into the ceiling tiles and stayed there for a week. But nothing had prepared him for what walked through the automatic doors on that cool October night. It was 11:47 p.m. when Paul stepped outside to swap out the overflowing trash receptacle near Pump 3. The mountain air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine needles and distant wood smoke. He'd just lifted the heavy bag when he heard it. The familiar electronic chime of the store's automatic door sliding open behind him. That's odd, he thought. He hadn't seen any headlights pull into the lot. When Paul turned around, trash bag still in hand, his breath caught in his throat. Through the glass storefront, illuminated by the harsh fluorescent lights, he could see a shape moving inside. Low to the ground. Deliberate. Absolutely not human. The trash bag hit the pavement with a dull thump. Paul moved quickly but carefully back toward the entrance, his heart hammering against his ribs. The automatic door slid open with its cheerful chime, completely oblivious to the fact that its last visitor had 4 legs and a short, stubby tail. Holy! Paul's voice died in his throat. Standing in the middle of his store, between the motor oil display and the beef jerky rack, was a bobcat. Not a house cat. Not a small dog that someone might mistake for a wild animal. An actual, honest-to-God bobcat, roughly twice the size of any domestic cat Paul had ever seen, with tufted ears, powerful shoulders, and a coat of tawny gold marked with dark spots that seemed to shimmer under the lights. "Easy there," Paul said, his voice cracking slightly. He raised both hands in what he hoped was a non-threatening gesture, though his mind was racing. Wildlife rehabilitation protocol flashed through his memory, something he'd learned years ago during a mandatory safety training. Never corner a wild animal. Give it an escape route. Don't make sudden movements. The bobcat's head swiveled toward him, and for one frozen moment, their eyes met. The animal's gaze was golden, wild, and utterly unafraid. This wasn't a lost or confused creature. This was a predator in complete control of its faculties, and Paul was suddenly, acutely aware that he was alone in a convenience store with an apex predator. Okay, Paul said softly, taking a slow step backward. You do your thing. I'm just gonna not be in your way." He clapped his hands once, hoping the sharp sound might startle the animal into leaving. Instead, the bobcat's ears flattened against its skull, and a low hiss erupted from its throat, a sound that seemed to vibrate through Paul's chest. The animal's shoulders hunched, muscles coiling beneath that spotted coat, and Paul instinctively took 3 more steps back. Every instinct screamed at him to retreat, and Paul listened. But the bobcat didn't attack. It didn't even seem particularly interested in Paul anymore. Instead, with an eerie focus that suggested this wasn't its first rodeo, the animal turned and padded down the center aisle. Its movements were fluid, confident, purposeful. This wasn't the erratic behavior of a rabid or sick animal. This was something else entirely. Paul watched, mesmerized, as the bobcat made its way to the far end of the store where they kept pet supplies. A small section with dog toys, cat litter, and various treats and foods for the locals' pets. The bobcat stopped in front of the cat treat display, rose up on its hind legs with surprising grace, and examined the shelves. Then, with a single deliberate motion, it bit into a bright orange bag of premium cat treats, lifted it from the shelf with its powerful jaws, and turned around. The bobcat trotted past Paul like a customer who'd just completed a successful shopping trip, the bag dangling from its mouth. The automatic door sensed its approach and obligingly slid open. The animal paused for just a moment in the threshold, turned its head to glance back at Paul one last time, and then vanished into the darkness beyond the parking lot. Paul stood frozen for a full 30 seconds, his brain trying to process what his eyes had just witnessed. Finally, he walked over to the door and peered out into the night. The parking lot was empty save for his old pickup truck. The forest beyond was an impenetrable wall of shadows. "Did that really just happen?" he said aloud to no one. He pulled out his phone and called his coworker Dave Morrison, who was scheduled to relieve him at 6 a.m. Dave answered on the 4th ring, voice thick with sleep. "Paul? It's almost midnight, man. What's wrong?" "Dave, you're not gonna believe what just happened. A bobcat just walked into the store, grabbed a bag of cat treats, and walked out." There was a long pause. "Did you get into the expired energy drinks again?" "I'm serious. I'm looking at the security footage right now. It's all here." "You better save that. Nobody's gonna believe it otherwise." Dave yawned. "Get yourself some coffee, Paul. Sounds like it's gonna be a long night." But Dave was wrong. The rest of the night passed without incident. Paul spent most of it rewatching the security footage, marveling at the clarity with which it had captured the entire bizarre encounter. The timestamp showed the whole thing had lasted less than 3 minutes. 3 nights later, Dave was manning the register during his own graveyard shift when the door chime rang at 1:23 a.m. He glanced up from his phone, expecting to see a late-night trucker or maybe a local on their way home from a closing shift. Instead, he saw spots and tufted ears. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me," Dave breathed. The bobcat was back. Same animal. He was sure of it. The markings were identical to the ones in Paul's security footage. But this time, the animal seemed even more comfortable. It didn't just grab and run. Instead, it walked deliberately to the pet supply aisle, rose up on its hind legs, and knocked an entire bulk-sized bag of treats to the floor. The bag split open on impact, sending individually wrapped treats scattering across the linoleum tiles. The bobcat then proceeded to sprawl on the floor like it owned the place, methodically tearing into treat after treat, completely ignoring Dave's presence. Dave's hand trembled slightly as he pulled out his phone. First, he texted Paul, "SOS, your friend is back and she's making herself at home." Then he called the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission hotline. To his relief, they answered quickly. Wildlife Resources, this is Officer Janet Reeves. What's your emergency? Hi, yeah, this is Dave Morrison at the Pine Top Gas and Go on Route 74. I've got a bobcat inside my store right now and she's eating cat treats on the floor and doesn't seem interested in leaving. There was a brief pause. Sir, did you say a bobcat is inside your store? Yes, ma'am. A big one. This is actually the second time. She was here a few nights ago, too. Is the animal showing any signs of aggression or illness? Staggering, excessive drooling, apparent disorientation? Dave looked at the bobcat, who had just successfully opened another treat packet and was munching contentedly. No, ma'am. She seems very purposeful, healthy, just really wants these cat treats. Okay, don't approach the animal. We're sending officers to your location. Should be there in about 20 minutes. Can you safely exit the building? Dave glanced at the bobcat again, who was now batting a foil wrapper around like a toy. I think so. She's pretty focused on what she's doing. Good. Wait outside. We'll handle it when we arrive. Dave grabbed his jacket and his phone, gave the bobcat one last incredulous look, and carefully made his way to the door. The animal didn't even glance in his direction. Officers Janet Reeves and Marcus Thompson arrived in a white Wildlife Resources Commission truck, equipped with specialized gear for exactly these kinds of situations. Both were experienced wildlife officers who'd handled everything from aggressive coyotes to confused black bears. But even they had to admit this was unusual. Bobcats don't typically enter buildings like this, Janet said as they geared up. Especially not repeatedly. They're solitary, secretive animals. Something's driving this behavior. Marcus nodded, checking the mesh pole they'd used to safely capture the animal. Could be sick. Could be habituated to humans. Either way, we need to get her out before someone gets hurt. They entered the store cautiously, moving with the practiced efficiency of professionals who understood they were dealing with a wild predator. The bobcat was still in the pet supply aisle, surrounded by shredded packaging and empty treat wrappers. When the animal spotted them, everything changed. The relaxed posture vanished instantly. The bobcat's body went rigid, ears flattening against its skull. Its lips pulled back, revealing impressive canine teeth, and a sound emerged from its throat that made both officers pause. A guttural, resonant snarl that spoke of pure wildness, of an animal that would fight if pushed. Easy, girl, Janet said softly, taking a slow, calculated step forward. She'd done this hundreds of times. The key was staying calm, moving deliberately, giving the animal space to make decisions. But this bobcat wasn't interested in space. With explosive speed that belied its recent snacking session, the bobcat launched itself forward. It didn't attack, not quite, but it rushed toward them with mouth agape in a wild hiss that echoed off the store's walls, stopping just feet from where they stood. The message was crystal clear. Stay back. Both officers froze. Marcus's hand tightened on the capture pole, but he didn't move. They'd learned long ago that escalating force with wildlife often ended badly for everyone involved. The bobcat held its ground for a moment, golden eyes blazing, chest heaving. Then, as suddenly as it had charged, it spun around with liquid grace. In one fluid motion, it grabbed a torn bag of treats from the floor, one that still had contents inside, and bolted toward the open door. "She's running," Marcus called out, but it was pointless. The bobcat was already gone, vanishing into the night with its prize clenched firmly in its jaws. Janet and Marcus stood in the fluorescent-lit aisle, surrounded by the debris of the bobcat's snacking session, looking at each other with expressions of complete bewilderment. "Did that just happen?" Marcus asked. "She just grabbed another bag and ran," Janet said slowly. "Like she knew exactly what she came for. This isn't random, Marcus. This is targeted behavior." "We need to trap her," Marcus said, "before she gets comfortable enough to do this during business hours. Someone could get seriously hurt." They set up a humane trap that night. A large cage-style trap designed specifically for medium-sized predators, baited with, appropriately enough, an entire bag of the same cat treats the Bobcat had been stealing. They positioned it at the edge of the parking lot near the tree line where the animal had disappeared. "She'll be back," Janet predicted. "Whatever's driving this behavior, it's strong enough to overcome her natural wariness of humans. She'll be back." Janet was right. The next morning, just after dawn, Dave arrived for his shift to find the trap occupied. The Bobcat was inside, pacing the confines of the cage with agitated energy, but clearly exhausted. Her coat, which had looked so lustrous under the store lights, now appeared somewhat dull. There were subtle signs of stress, flattened ears, rapid breathing, a slight tremor in her movements. "Hey there," Dave said softly, keeping his distance. "You're gonna be okay now. These folks know what they're doing." When the wildlife officers arrived, they transported the Bobcat immediately to the Western Carolina Wildlife Center, a rehabilitation facility about 40 minutes away that specialized in native species recovery and care. The facility was run by Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a veterinarian with over 15 years of experience in wildlife medicine. Meanwhile, back at the gas station, Paul had arrived for his shift, and Dave was eager to show him the security footage from the previous night's dramatic confrontation. They sat in the small back office, coffee cooling in paper cups, watching the grainy footage replay on the monitor. The timestamp showed 1:23 a.m. when the door first opened. They watched the Bobcat enter, watched it raid the treats, watched the officers arrive. But then Dave backed up the footage several days. "Look at this," he said, pointing at the screen. "This is from 5 days ago. Tuesday afternoon." The footage showed a delivery truck pulling up to the side entrance. A driver in a brown uniform got out, opened the back, and started unloading boxes. One box, clearly damaged from transport, split open as he lifted it. Its contents, multiple bags of cat treats, spilled across the pavement. The driver spent a few minutes gathering up what he could, but several bags had rolled under the truck or into the nearby bushes. He collected what was easily accessible and went inside to complete the delivery. The timestamp jumped forward. 9:47 p.m. The parking lot was empty, lit only by the overhead lights. Then, at the edge of the frame, a shadow appeared. The Bobcat emerged from the tree line, nose to the ground, moving in a clear tracking pattern. "She followed the scent," Paul breathed. "From wherever she was in those mountains, she tracked those treats right to our door." "But why?" Dave asked. "Bobcats hunt rabbits, squirrels, birds. Why would she risk coming near humans for cat treats?" Paul leaned back in his chair, something clicking in his mind. Fragments of information from the wildlife training he'd taken years ago, combined with simple intuition. "Dave, what if she's not just hungry? What if she's feeding more than just herself?" The answer came that afternoon when Dr. Mitchell called the gas station, asking to speak with Paul or Dave. Paul took the call, pressing the phone tightly to his ear as the doctor explained what they'd discovered during the Bobcat's initial examination. "She's a nursing mother," Dr. Mitchell said. "Probably has a litter hidden somewhere in the forest. Based on her condition, I'd estimate her kittens are about 4 to 6 weeks old. Old enough to start eating solid food, but still dependent on her. Paul felt something tighten in his chest. So she was supplementing her hunting to feed her babies, Dr. Mitchell confirmed. Bobcats typically have 2 to 3 kittens per litter. That's a lot of mouths to feed, especially during a season when prey might be less abundant. Those cat treats, they're high in protein and fat. For a nursing mother, they're essentially fast food, easy calories that she can bring back to her den. Is she okay? The kittens? She's showing signs of stress and exhaustion, but no illness or injury. We're keeping her here for observation and supportive care, fluids, high-quality food, a quiet space to rest. The kittens, that's trickier. We don't know exactly where her den is, and bobcat mothers are very secretive about den locations. But bobcat kittens are remarkably resilient. If she's been successful at hunting and bringing them food, they should be fine for the short time she's here. How long will you keep her? Just a few days, long enough to make sure she's healthy and fully recovered. Then we'll release her back near where she was trapped. She'll find her way back to her kittens. Paul thanked the doctor and hung up. He stood in the small office for a long moment, staring at the security monitor that now showed the empty parking lot in real time. "Dave," he called out, "I'm going to take my break. Be back in an hour." He drove to the Western Carolina Wildlife Center without really deciding to. The facility was nestled in a valley, surrounded by the same dense forest that the bobcat called home. It was a collection of low buildings and outdoor enclosures designed to minimize human contact while providing animals with the care they needed. Dr. Mitchell met him at the front desk, a knowing smile on her face. "You must be Paul. Janet mentioned you might stop by. I wanted to see her. If that's okay." "It's okay. But we'll need to keep our distance. She's still wild, and we want to keep her that way. The whole point is to release her back where she belongs." She led him around the main building to a series of outdoor enclosures at the back. Each was spacious, designed to mimic natural habitat as closely as possible. In the third enclosure, partially hidden beneath a wooden shelter, was the bobcat. In the natural daylight, away from the harsh fluorescence of the gas station, she was breathtaking. Her coat was a patchwork of gold and cream and brown, each spot and stripe perfectly designed for melting into dappled forest light. She was smaller than Paul remembered, maybe 25 pounds, but compact with muscle, every inch of her built for survival. She was resting, but her eyes were open, alert. When she noticed Paul and Dr. Mitchell, she didn't hiss or growl. She simply watched, golden eyes unblinking. "She's beautiful," Paul said quietly. "Lynx rufus," Dr. Mitchell said. "They're one of North America's most successful predators. Adaptable, intelligent, and remarkably resilient. This girl has probably lived her entire life within a few miles of your gas station, and you never knew she was there. That's how good they are at staying hidden." "Will she be able to find her kittens after this?" "Absolutely. Bobcats have excellent spatial memory. She knows every inch of her territory. Once we release her, she'll head straight back to her den. The kittens will be hungry, but they'll survive a few days without her. Nature is harsh, but it's also incredibly resilient." Paul reached into the bag he'd brought with him, a bag he'd grabbed from the store on his way out. He pulled out a new, unopened, bulk-sized package of the same cat treats the bobcat had been stealing. Can you give her these? I mean, I know she's getting proper food here, but I just thought..." Dr. Mitchell's expression softened. "That's very kind, Paul. Yes, we can supplement her diet with these. They're actually not bad nutritionally. High protein, some good fats. Better than some of the garbage treats on the market." Paul handed over the bag, looking back at the bobcat. She was still watching him, head tilted slightly, ears forward. For just a moment, he could swear she recognized him. "We're going to release her in 4 days," Dr. Mitchell said. "Friday morning, just after dawn. That's when she'd normally be returning to her den after a night of hunting. Would you like to be there?" Paul didn't hesitate. "Yeah, I'd like that." Dave came too. They both took the morning off, driving through the pre-dawn darkness to reach the wildlife center by 5:30 a.m. The release site was about a quarter-mile from the gas station, deep enough into the forest that the bobcat would feel safe, but close enough to her territory that she could easily navigate home. Dr. Mitchell was there, along with Officers Reeves and Thompson. The bobcat was in a transport carrier in the back of the Wildlife Resources truck, quiet but alert. "We've seen this dozens of times," Janet said softly as they gathered around. "It never gets old. Every release feels like a small miracle." They carried the crate into a small clearing where early morning light was just beginning to filter through the pine canopy. The forest was alive with sound. Birds singing their dawn chorus, the rustle of small animals beginning their day. Dr. Mitchell knelt beside the carrier. "Okay, girl. Time to go home." She opened the door and stepped back quickly. For a moment, nothing happened. The bobcat remained in the carrier, probably assessing whether this was safe, whether this was another trap. Then, slowly, she emerged. She stepped into the clearing, muscles tense, every sense on high alert. She paused, nose working the air, taking in the scents of her forest. Her ears swiveled, cataloging sounds. Then her head turned, and for just a moment, her gaze swept across the small group of humans who had gathered to see her off. Paul felt that gaze land on him, and he could swear, though he knew it was probably just his imagination, that there was recognition there. A moment of connection between two very different creatures who had shared something strange and unexpected. "Go on," Paul whispered. "Your babies are waiting." As if she'd heard him, the bobcat turned away. She took 3 steps toward the tree line, then paused once more, looking back over her shoulder. Then she bounded forward and disappeared into the undergrowth, her spotted coat vanishing into the dappled shadows as if she'd never been there at all. Dave let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Well, I'll be damned." "She'll be fine," Dr. Mitchell said confidently. "Her kittens will be fine. They're survivors, just like her." As they walked back to their vehicles, the forest growing brighter around them as the sun climbed higher, Janet fell into step beside Paul. "You know," she said, "in all my years doing this job, I've seen animals do extraordinary things to protect their young. Travel miles through dangerous territory, risk encounters with predators, face down threats much larger than themselves. But I think this might be the first time I've seen one repeatedly rob a convenience store." Paul laughed. A real laugh. The kind that shakes your shoulders and clears your chest. "Yeah, well, she just wanted to feed her family. Can't blame her for that." "No," Janet agreed. "No, you can't." 3 weeks later, Paul was restocking the pet supply aisle. They'd actually expanded it, adding more variety to their cat treat selection, when Dave called him over to the front window. "Paul, you gotta see this." At the edge of the parking lot, where the asphalt met the forest, 3 small shapes were visible in the fading evening light. Bobcat kittens, probably about 2 months old now, tumbling and playing in the grass while their mother watched from a few feet away. The mother bobcat. Their bobcat, Paul thought, though he knew that was absurd, sat perfectly still, her spotted coat almost glowing in the golden hour light. As Paul watched, she turned her head toward the store. Their eyes met across the distance. Then she gathered her kittens with a soft sound Paul couldn't hear, and the family disappeared into the trees. "She made it," Dave said, his voice thick with emotion. "They all made it." Paul nodded, not trusting himself to speak. In his pocket, his phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Mitchell. "Heard you might have some visitors. Mama and baby's all healthy. Nature's pretty amazing, isn't it?" Paul typed back, "Yeah, it really is." That night, as he locked up the store and headed to his truck, Paul looked out at the dark forest surrounding them. Somewhere in those mountains, a bobcat mother was teaching her kittens to hunt, to survive, to be wild. She'd risked everything: her safety, her freedom, her instinctive wariness of humans, to give them the best chance at life. And all for the love of her family. Paul smiled to himself as he drove home through the mountain darkness. Tomorrow he'd come back, clock in for another graveyard shift, ring up coffee and lottery tickets and bags of chips. But tonight, he carried something different with him. A reminder that the boundary between wild and civilized was thinner than most people realized, and that sometimes, in the most unexpected moments, you could witness something truly extraordinary. All because a determined mother decided that a convenience store was exactly what her family needed. And really, when Paul thought about it, he couldn't blame her one bit.